In episode 4 of the International Interview Series, Season 2, hosted by the Forensic Corner, we have Harry A. Millman, who is a consulting pharmacologist, toxicologist, and expert witness with over 40 years of experience at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. National Cancer Institute, the National Institute of Health, and the U.S. Public Health Service. Dr. Millman assisted in over 300 civil, criminal, and high profile legal cases and has testified at trials and depositions. He has authored about 70 scientific articles and has edited 5 science books, including the highly acclaimed Handbook of Carcinogen Testing, often quoted in the newspaper and magazines. Dr. Millman appeared as a toxicological expert on the History Channel, the Oxygen Channel, TV and radio news programs, and in true crime television shows. Dr. Millman is the author of 2 novels, A Death at Camp David, winner of the Best Mystery Novel in the 2018 Book Talk Radio Club Awards, and Soyuz, The Final Flight, a finalist for the Best Second Novel in the 2018 Next Generation Indie Book Awards. And recently, he has published another book by the name of Forensics, The Science Behind the Death of Famous People, where he talks about the description of how coroners describe the cause and manner of death, the detailed analysis that was involved, and investigative, and he has investigation of 23 deaths of famous people, including Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson, and so many more. And he has also publicly done a review of the available autopsy and toxicological reports, as well as published scientific and lay articles. So this is a worthwhile reading this book. So we have shared the link of this book in the description below of this video, so you guys can get a copy of this book and also support sir, and because it takes a lot of hard work in writing books. And you guys can let us know in the comment section that how this book was, and definitely we are going to have more further interaction with sir in the future. So you guys stay tuned and start listening this wonderful interview where sir talks about his career in pursuing PhD toxicology and how he planned to do something else, but he landed up in the field of forensics. So it's a very inspiring journey filled with hardships. So it's very inspiring. You guys can listen to them. And also apart from that, he talks about that what are the ideal key aspects that should a student and an investigator should have. And finally, he talks about the interesting book he has written right now, Forensics, the Science Behind the Death of Famous People. So stay tuned, guys, and start supporting the Forensic Corner. Thank you so much for coming to the Forensic Corner. I really appreciate that you could get your time today for such a lovely interaction. I'm looking forward to this. I can see that you are having a lot of experience, and definitely I'll be sharing your experience today to the Forensic Corner community, and I hope people will look forward to our interview. So let's get started, sir. So sir, could you please give light about how you have contributed to the forensic community, and could you describe yourself that how the journey began to pursuing PhD in toxicology and how your contribution was there to our society, sir? Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me today. I really appreciate it. And it's really great to interact with the students and other interest parties in India about forensics. It really makes the world much smaller when we use the internet like this. So I thank you very much. So just to get into my background really quickly, and I know you have many students who are also listening. So when I was a student back in high school, and if you ask me, what do you want to do when you grow up? I always thought I was going to be an electrical engineer. I was very good in math, and I thought I was going to be an electrical engineer. I liked electricity. I did all sorts of projects. with electricity. I thought I was going to be an electrical engineer. And look at what happened to me. I wound up in the biological sciences, not in math at all. I wound up in the biological sciences. And my first degree was in pharmacy. I worked in the drugstore while I was going to school. And then after my second degree was also in pharmaceutics, a master's in pharmaceutics. Now when I finished my master's, that gave me the idea that I became interested in research. And I decided I didn't want to work in a drugstore, but I wanted to work in research. And I know that in order to work in research, if you want to move up the ladder, you need a PhD. So I always had in my mind to have a PhD. But at that time, when I got my master's, there weren't too many jobs available for PhDs. So I thought that if I can get a job that requires me to have a PhD, then I'll get my PhD while I'm working, because I'll have the job and I'll also be able to go for my PhD. So I had that in the back of my mind. So when I finished my master's, I joined the American government. And my first job was as a pharmacist on an Indian reservation in Minnesota. So for your listeners and viewers who are not familiar with Minnesota is about halfway in the United States, in the north. So it's very cold. About 40 Fahrenheit. So it's very cold and lots of snow. And I came from New York City, 9 million people, Minnesota, where I was, 100 people. So it was a big culture shock. So it was a culture shock and cold. And my first job, my job there for 2 years was as a first pharmacist on an Indian reservation. But I got into the government, and after 2 years, I transferred to the National Institutes of Health in Maryland, into a laboratory of toxicology. And I worked there for 10 years. And during those 10 years, they put me through a PhD program in pharmacology at the local university, the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. So I did my coursework downtown, my project, my thesis on the job. I also had a job, and it was pretty much the way I had thought about how my life should go. 10 years after that, after I got my PhD 7 years after that. So, and 10 years after I worked at the National Institute of Health, I transferred to the Environmental Protection Agency in Washington, D.C. I was there for 18 years. And now, after 30 years in the government, I was a toxicology and cancer expert. I published 5 scientific books, many scientific papers. And what should I do now? Somebody recommended me to testify in court. They knew me, they thought I would be very good to testify as a toxicology expert in court. And that experience, I enjoyed that experience because it was very academically stimulating. And so I set up a website. And now, 22 years later, I've done 325 cases where I was an expert working with lawyers all over the country, as well as Australia and Canada. Let me just, so I work with lawyers, excuse me. I work with lawyers now all over the country. They find my website, they find me. I'm an expert in toxicology, cancer, pharmacology, and pharmacy errors. And as you know, when a lot of times there's a interaction between many of these disciplines. And so you can have an overdose on one hand, and that means pharmacology, but it also means toxicology. And if you have exposure to a chemical, it can be toxicology and cancer. So there's many interactions, and so I can take my whole background and experience and work as an expert in litigation. And I've done 325 cases, defense and plaintiff. And in the course of doing that, in the course of being an expert, And before I testify in court, I read the autopsy reports, the police reports, medical records, the scientific literature, and then I formulate an opinion on the likely cause of what happened here, that the drug overdose caused the death, for example. So after doing that for about 20 years, one day I came up with an idea for a story that I can maybe write a book. And that was my first book. It was about 5 years ago. It was called A Death at Camp David. I want A Death at Camp David. It was a mystery with the main character, a forensic toxicologist. So I could take my whole background and experience, put it into the main character. It took me 2.5 years to write the book. I thought it would be my one and only book because it was a lot of work, but everybody loved it. They said, what are you writing next? I didn't know. They said, you can't just write one, you got to write a sequel. So then I wrote my second one, a science fiction story with the same forensic toxicologist as the main character. And after I wrote that one, now what should I write for my third? One day, about 4 years ago, I hear that Carrie Fisher, the actress who played in Star Wars, died. She had a medical emergency on an airplane. And a few days later, after they landed in the hospital in Los Angeles, she went to the hospital, and a few days later, she died. So, and when they announced what her death was, the cause of her death, the coroner, the medical examiner, indicated that she died from sleep apnea. Sleep apnea, for your viewers, is when a person stops breathing for a few seconds at a time. It doesn't necessarily cause death, but it's something to watch out for, because they stop breathing for a few seconds. So Carrie Fisher had this condition for many years. No, the public didn't know about it, but she had this condition for many years. What the public did know is that she was addicted to drugs. So when I heard that she died from sleep apnea, I was surprised, because I thought she probably had a drug overdose on the plane. So I looked further into that death, and I examined the autopsy and how the coroner arrived at his conclusion. And so that gave me an idea to then look for, to see if I can find autopsy records of other famous people. And that's how the idea for the book came about. The book is called Forensics, the Science Behind the Deaths of Famous People. It's available on many online stores, including Amazon and Bookswagon.com, where it's available both as an ebook, hardcover, and softcover. And so I researched 23 different famous people. Where I could look at the autopsy, I did that. Otherwise, I also looked at various articles that were written at the time in the lay press, and of course the scientific literature. So my interest was not to write a textbook, but to write a book that describes forensics for a non-scientist who's unfamiliar with science. So to describe what happened here, and also how the coroners determined the cause of death, and make sure that I can explain the science in easy, understandable terms that a non-scientist can understand. And so some of the comments that I have is that it reads like a mystery novel, because I start off with the incident, what happened, and then after that I get into the details and then the biography of the person. So there's a lot of good reviews, and that's how the books originated.
So first of all, when you started with your introduction and the way you described your book, first of all, I would like to say that your journey is really inspiring, because as a student point of view, what I saw there was that you had that
that inside a fire in you, that you have to explore things, and you kept yourself busy, that I have to work, I have to even make money so that I can, support myself and my family. I can see that because you were working, and also you never stopped learning. And the time you spend, the years you have given to this all things, and writing a book itself is a very tedious task, because as I am a keen writer for the magazines, because my interest was to promote forensic science. The forensic corner itself, it has that aim that we have to promote the scientific knowledge that is not known to people, by bringing experts from different parts of the world. So same way, I used to even write articles for magazines in a layman language. And I can remember that, sir, that time I had to research a lot, like looking at the articles, seeing that whether there are some pros or there are some cons regarding that, maybe some kind of a myth or some kind of a issue that is being raised. So I have to consider all these facts, and then have to write an article. And then looking at you, that you have written major books, it definitely has a lot of investment of time, and definitely it's worth reading, because the efforts of the author and the experience itself is surprising, sir. And I would like to even say my viewers today that Sir Harry sir is an amazing person. He's an amazing person. You can see that by now, that the way he described his journey, that's really surprising. And the way he have hard work, the years, the time he has given, that's really, really, really inspiring. So first of all, I'll tell you guys that the link to his book is given in the description, and please do read it, please do buy it. And we would definitely like to know the comments, and definitely we will try to reach your comments to sir also, so that he can know that how the book was. And definitely, I, as a student who's doing toxicology, now I can feel that I have to work more harder, because turns out it's not just studying, it's a lot more to explore. Because I think toxicology is a science, it's basically an ocean with endless possibilities and endless multidisciplinary approach. So definitely, even I will read this book. And sir, I'm really, really thankful that you could give your time today for such a lovely interaction. And most of all, the way you described your journey, again, I have a lot, I want to talk a lot with you, but I know that the time foundations and other things are there. But definitely, I'm looking forward to another interaction soon. And this time, I promise you that after reading your book, I'll get into another interaction, so that even though the viewers can know that how this book was. So sir, it was really nice. And I hope I hope you have something to say to the viewers and to the forensic corner, so that we, as a student, the message you want to give, anything, sir.
Yeah. I think for those students who are very much into forensics and especially toxicology, there are two takeaways I want to give you. One about life, which that is to say professional life, and that is to always keep your eyes and ears open for opportunities. You don't know where your life is going to take you. And that's why I gave you the example that I was going to be an electrical engineer because of my interest in math, but I wound up with the biological sciences, totally unexpected. It's all because you keep your eyes and ears open, and you go with the flow, and see where life takes you. I never planned. I never planned to be a toxicologist. I never planned to write books. I never planned to be an expert witness in court. But it's one of those things that just happens.
Yeah.
And somebody recommended me to testify. Somebody said, "Why don't you write a book?" And I did. And now I get interviewed by in podcasts in India and everywhere else, and on television. I mean, none of this was planned, but I'm having a lot of fun and I'm enjoying it. So always go with the flow, and keep your eyes and ears open, and see where your life will take you. Uh, as far as toxicology, I just want you, again, your readers to and your viewers to know that when we talk about litigation and toxicology, that is one major concept that you should be aware of, and that is the difference between cause of death and manner of death. So the coroner determines cause of death and manner of death. Now, cause of death is a biological explanation of why a person died. So, for example, and that's where forensics comes in to help determine what the cause of death is. Did he die from respiratory depression? Did he die from a heart attack? A couple examples. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward, and there's usually no dispute about determination of cause of death. Manner of death is more of a legal medical interpretation of the circumstances surrounding the death. So that's the area where all the conspiracy theories come, because there are 5 basic categories: natural, homicide, suicide, accident, and when none of these fit, then it's undetermined. So you can see where one person might say it was a suicide and another one might say it's a homicide or an accident. So that's where it's a kind of an interpretation of the situation surrounding the death, so that different people can interpret different ways. And that's where you get so when you hear on the news and you read all the tabloids about, oh, he didn't die from this, he died, really it was a homicide or a suicide, that's misinterpreting the information to suit their interest, you know? The fact of the matter is, generally speaking, it fits into one of those categories, and the coroner determines based on the situation. But that's the area of the greatest conspiracy theories. They can't do anything much. That's forensics helps in the cause of death. They can't do much about that because that's straightforward. Science doesn't lie. But the manner of death is subject to interpretation, and that's where you get the conspiracy theories.
So definitely the points you have highlighted that are very important as a student life, because most of our viewers are students, and even professionals are our viewers, and even I as a student, I can see that these points are very important and crucial in the person who's pursuing a scientific career. Because if we are not scientifically credible, we cannot give a judgment or we cannot give an opinion. And definitely we will keep this in mind, the key points that you have given us and the enlightenment you have given us. Definitely, sir.
Well, that's great. And I'm looking forward to another discussion because,
Yeah.
as you can imagine, I have many things more I can tell you.
Yes, sir, definitely.